It was a new experience for me, an experience with the unknown, and to have somebody face to face interpreting my gaze. And for you, it was also a unique experience, or you practice this kind of experience. You are working with Abramovich also. The violinist is present. My first question is, what is this experience for you?
It started as a search for a way to be more in contact with the public and to have the public have an active role in the performance, to be part of the performance themselves. And for me, the most rewarding thing I feel about the violinist is present in this performance is the dialogue between me and the person in front of me. I feel like you as the public you are performing also, and you are directly influencing my music, my sound, my performance, and this is what I'm searching for in general as an artist and as a performer, is to have the public not as passive spectators just watching the concert on the stage, but part of the performance and involved.
Yes, I was also active, but it was not only me, it was my gaze.
Yeah.
And for me, it was also a curious relation with the gaze as an object, the gaze as outside, a part of me which is also outside and inside, and you are looking for something that I don't know. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Because for you, the gaze is also present in your experience and in your interpretation. Are you interpreting the subject, or are you interpreting the gaze?
So I'm not trying to paint a portrait of you. I'm trying to interpret what emotions I see in your eyes. I really just focus on eyes. What emotions, what kind of character, or anything I see there, any kind of emotional spectrum. I try to go in all the directions that I read.
What is interesting in what you're saying, and there are many things, but one I was wondering, because you referred to when you're in a concert, so aren't there actually two conditions? One, when you interpret a piece of music that was written by a composer, and you want to engage in an exchange with the public, but still within, you have space for interpretation, but of course there are the constraints of the score which was written. And what we did with François, and you'll do with me later, is in fact you are improvising. So this is different. I presume that one is, these are two different conditions. How do you live them?
It's a very different experience. As you know, I'm trained as a classical violinist, and I've played almost my whole life. It feels very freeing to create new kinds of performances, which are, mostly improvisation or based on other kinds of music. I'm doing a lot of work now with performance art and with creating my own performances, which are based on rituals, ancient rituals from my ancestors or from other cultures. And there is, of course, a huge amount more of freedom than if I'm interpreting something written by someone else or another classical composer.
But in terms of the engagement you have when you're on a one-to-one, face-to-face, and improvising, of course, you are improvising, inventing, or translating something that you perceive in the gaze. When you are on a stage interpreting a classical piece, can you still interpret, if I may say, the gaze of someone you're looking at in the public, or do you have the public as a whole? How does this? I think they're really completely different. Yeah.
When I'm doing the violinist is present, it's much more fresh and it's much more. It's a really brand new experience, and this is really why I created it. If I'm playing Bach, Chaconne, the really amazing, very well-known violin piece, it's an incredible work which has survived hundreds of years, but people come with an expectation of what they will hear or what they will experience. And with this improvisation, you have no idea what is going to happen. So you're immediately brought into this kind of, it breaks all of the notions and boundaries, and that's what I'm excited by.
It is really a relation with the unknown, the unknown in you and the unknown in the other.
Yeah.
It's an experience with the unknown, like unconscious, perhaps.
Yeah.
The place of unconscious in interpretation, because we are looking for something in the gaze of the other, something which is perhaps conscious, and something which is unconscious. Yeah. Have you an idea of what are you reading in the gaze of the other?
So many things.
For example, in my gaze.
Well, there's so many directions to go in when I read a person. Because I don't see just one emotion, I see many possibilities, and maybe there's one which seems stronger, and I play in that direction. So, for example, it could be melancholy, and I decide that I'm going to go with this feeling of melancholy, and then I improvise on violin how that sounds to me, and maybe this person reacts then.
Exactly.
And maybe I was wrong, and they react in another way, and I change completely the music because they change the emotion. It's hard to say what else is there. I mean, you could. I've had really powerful experiences with people doing this, and I don't know if it was just this power of nonverbal connection and nonverbal communication that we lack so much now, or if it was some kind of soul interaction of souls. I don't know.
But you excuse me. You use the response of the other. You begin. You make a choice, a conscious or unconscious choice. It's a moment without sounds, and after you take the violin, it's like a decision.
Yeah.
And after you look at the effect of your choice on the other, and you change the improvisation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In these conversations that we have, we try to. The idea is to do an experiment, an improvisation, actually, around a few of the themes that have been at the basis of our work together, and that we are expanding here at Agalma. And one of the aspects that we have studied and proposed in the models of unconscious life that we proposed is the notion of a strong connection between the somatic state, the states of the body, and a representation. Essentially, the idea is that, through experiences, any experience will trigger a sensory response and maybe a trace of this, which is a representation, you remember something. And to this is associated a state of your body which somehow provides an emotional connotation to this. I mean, actually it goes back to the work of William James whose main theme was that actually perceptions per se are relatively neutral emotionally, but what gives the emotional connotation to a perception is the state of your body. If you're angry, you have your heart rate that increases, you have a series of somatic states that eventually become encoded with the representation, and that constitutes a unit. R, representation, and S, the somatic state. So what I'd like to expand here, and just for discussion, is that when you say that you see an emotion or you see something in the gaze, if I may just give you my idea based on our work, is that actually the gaze triggers in you a somatic state, something that is clearly then associated in your own mind, brain, it's the same for me. I know we not necessarily completely agree on this. This somatic state triggers or is associated with a representation that you have something. And then this representation, you can actually act out this representation with a certain motor behavior, which is, in your case, if you were a dancer, you could probably interpret something with a movement, you know. So for me, this dialogue is based on an exchange of somatic states, in a way, which are then read through your motor output, and I think that's so. So it's not important. I mean, it's saying when you say I see, I would rather say, if I may, I feel something in my body that makes me act in a certain way with a motor output, which in your case is extremely harmonious and nice. Some other people cannot do this, and of course, and that then you engage in an exchange, because then possibly the music that you are playing evokes something in François.
Yes.
Some representation which triggers a certain somatic state, and then we have almost a ping pong between R and S of two individuals.
Yes, yes.
Do you think it's possible for me to accurately read the somatic state of the person in front of me?
You read your somatic states. You don't read, you feel your somatic.
It's very interesting because you are reading your somatic states, but through the effect of what you feel. It is the idea that it is not what you see, but what you feel. And it's an exchange between somatic markers. And that we have the impact of somatic markers on representation, on my own representation of your interpretation and on your interpretation of my representation. It's like a matrix with R of the RS from each one.
Which can even be changing over time.
Yes, and exchanging.
It's interesting because I never thought about it like this. Do you think it's more also about my ability to feel empathy then with is that the kind of
because empathy is complicated, but there may be something. I don't. It's interesting.
Well, it's for me to distinguish between representation and somatic states introduce the question of the drive, which is more important, and discharge of the drive, which is more important than empathy, which is more the capacity, the ability to perceive the emotion of the other. It's an emotion and with a mirror point of view and exchange, but I think it's the relation between R and S engage also the discharge and the motor activity of creation of music. And it is more interesting thinking about with the model of R and S representation and somatic states than only the exchange in the empathic process, I
Yeah.
think.
No, I think you put it very nicely. I think the idea between R and S is that there is a tension that produces a drive. This is really going back to the classic Freudian terminology, but it could be, you can even forget about it. The idea is that somehow to discharge, that's always the term that is used, you have a motor output, an action that comes from the interaction between R and S. And in this context, your action is this wonderful music that you produce. As I said, if you possibly were a dancer, you maybe would start, move some movements in a probably, again, very harmonious and artistic way, something, but it's...
Yes, but it is an action to... The aim of the action is, I don't know how exactly how to say that, to fishing up, to take something which is an object, the gaze of the other, for example. You are like, it's a motor act with the aim of taking something which is outside the other. Perhaps it's not clear. You have to translate not only in better English but also in a better language. The idea is it is a relation. In psychoanalysis, we distinguish between the eye and the gaze, and the gaze is the object of the scopic drive, and the drive is always the movement to take something which is impossible to touch. Mm-hmm. And I have really this experience. It's difficult for me to explain directly after the experience, but I have the impression we are in relation also through something which is enigmatic. It is not only an interpretation of an emotion; it is more than that. Yeah. You are. I don't know the term. Fishing up. It's okay. It's you are
to grasp.
Yes, grasp. Exactly, grasp. You're something which is between the eye and the gaze.
But in a way, you can also, now if we go back to the experiment, let's call it like this, you can say that really it's almost a co-construction of something between you two. I mean, you have the motor output. You have the motor output, but actually it's been something where François, as you said from the very beginning, that's what you want to achieve.
Yeah,
actually,
I want it to be a
to have the now. Again, going back to my first question, I think you can do this on a one-to-one basis in improvisation. I think as a performer of a classical piece, it's much more difficult, I presume, I imagine.
I don't know if it's possible.
I don't even know if it's possible, exactly.
Because you don't give...
Can I ask you something? You know, when I give talks in public, I always, or give lectures to students, I always talk to one person, and then I move and I look always someone that helps me kind of be more, I hope, more impactful. How about you as a performer? When you play, do you look at someone in the public or no?
If I'm just playing music and not doing performance artwork, then no. It's quite difficult because either you are focusing on, what you're playing, and you have a whole mass of people which on the stage either just looks like black or just a wall of humans, or otherwise I'm looking at the notes, and the stage, creates this distance where you can't really.
No, but that was just a side question. But I think this idea that what François with his gaze was triggering something in your body that you then express through this motor output associated with a representation. Because when you say melancholy, for example, well, okay, you perceive something as something in your body, and then you have probably several representations of melancholy. You have images of what it is. And then these two, so the somatic state and the representation, get associated, and you express this with the motor output, which is your music. But you need a representation yourself of melancholy.
What is your impression of the discourse of Pierre? Perhaps you have to interpret in another language.
Well,
a translation.
I mean, I never really thought so much about, because correct me if I'm wrong, but what I feel you're both saying is that a huge part of it comes from not just me reading the person, but what's inside me. Mm-hmm. And I never really thought about it that way. I always felt like I am and should be a mirror, and the violin and I am a mirror for the person in front of me. I never really think about what emotions are inside of me. I want to be kind of a vessel for the other person's emotions.
So François is playing your violin, essentially.
Yes, it was, it was the first time that I played the violin.
I didn't know, François, that you were a good violinist.
No, but I mean, I would like to imagine that his emotions are playing my violin.
Of course.
But I have had experiences where then, I don't know what it is. This is why I would be really interested to see if you can look at the brain waves of the two people when I do this performance. But sometimes I've had a really strong emotional reaction to a person, and it doesn't have to do with how they look or what gender or what age, but maybe this is what you're talking about, they trigger a very strong emotional experience for me, which kind of functions as it's sort of like a purification. I remember I had one time I did this performance, and a girl came to sit in front of me. I didn't know her, I didn't know her name, we'd never spoken before, and I was doing this long durational performance, so it was a 6-hour performance, and I was sort of halfway through.
Not with her only.
No, with many people.
Yeah.
And she came and sat in front of me, and immediately I felt this huge, I don't know what it was, empathy or acceptance from her of my current emotional state. And I felt that she could read me very strongly. And I had this huge emotional response of feeling very sad. I guess I had some deep sadness inside of me that was allowed to be freed by her for some reason, and I could see she could feel that in me, and she was reflecting it in her gaze at me. And so for a very long time I didn't even play the violin. I think we were just looking at each other, and then I finally started to play this reaction, and that time it was very much about how she made me feel. But other than that, I've never really thought about myself as an emotional responder during this performance. It's always about the person in front of me.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, this is just a way of looking at this from a certain conceptual framework that we have been working on. But it may well be that these emotions, I mean, they're very subtle. Maybe it's something unconscious that is coming out through this motor response that you really didn't even absolutely consciously note. And also, I think if you, in a way, I go back to the example of melancholy. I mean, if you see that someone triggers, I mean, what you see, let's go back to your view of this. When you say you see melancholy, let's say, then yourself to produce something, a tone, a music, that reflects melancholy according to you, you have to probably feel something, maybe unconsciously, and associated with some sort of representation of melancholy, and then all this comes out. But I think the point is that it's unconscious. That's probably why
I think
the difference
it is
is
unconscious, but one part, it's possible to interpret the experience like a mirror, empathy, imaginary process, and like the axis of imaginary process, and with the effect of something on the other in symmetry and so on. But for the other part, it is a whole in the experience. It's something absent, something real. And I think the root of improvisation is more function of this absent part than from the presence of the mirror of the emotion of the other. Because the tension, what is important is not the reflective process, but the tension inside the process, no? For me, it is two possible interpretations. An interpretation in terms of reflection, translation, and another interpretation in terms of motor act or of creation. I have a question, a simple question about that. Is it translation? Is it interpretation? Is it improvisation or creation?
All of those things.
Yes, I know, but it's not simple. But a creative process is something. What is the creative process in your activities? You are creating music, new music, unknown music. It's different than interpretation. It is really a creation, no?
Well, I mean, do you mean in this performance specifically, or in general in my?
No, in this kind of experience.
I think it's coming. I don't know where it's coming from the person in front of me, from all of my. I mean, of course, the music I'm playing is from all of my experiences as a musician, from everything I've ever heard that has stayed in my brain.
Traces.
Yes. Diachronic traces, yes, memory processes, recall of memories, repetition. And the other part?
Completely spontaneous, I think.
But you base your
that moment.
You base your creation on memories, on traces that you have accumulated over time. This is the meaning of diachronic traces, and then you have a synchronic emergence that somehow takes pieces here and there of what you have somewhere in your.
And it happens brain, unconsciously.
It happens unconsciously.
Yeah. I don't think about.
Without representation in the moment of the creation of the new. You are not. It's really a creation, emergence, and not a translation of a representation.
I think it's a readout of the unconscious. That's why you don't have a conscious representation.
I mean, everything in my musical unconscious.
It is not the artist is present, or the violinist is present, is your title. It is the unconscious is present.
But just to kind of to deconstruct this, I'm just wondering, when I presume you also interpret, improvise under other circumstances. Maybe when you're alone in your
in performances,
or also in performances. So now you're not. So can you distinguish from your point of view when you improvise in front, during performances, or when you're by yourself, or when you do this one-to-one experience, is the improvisation, different?
Well, definitely in terms of what is driving it or what is controlling it is very different, because there's a person, I believe there is a person in front of me who's steering, who's driving the path of the music. I'm also not thinking at all the style, the type of music, the language that it's in comes unconsciously. It can be classical, it can sound quite gypsy, it could sound quite contemporary, quite abstract. It totally depends on the moment and how this person makes me react. And but then I have other situations where I'm collaborating with, for example, folk singers from Lithuania, and who sing a very specific kind of really ancient folk song, and then in that place I would create improvisation to go with that, to fit that in the right way. Or with a Hungarian folk musician in a kind of more contemporary, sort of jazzy way, then I go in that direction. So it's always reacting to...
That's when you're playing with other...
Yeah.
But do you ever improvise just by yourself?
Yeah.
And there...
What is the difference?
Then I'm looking inside.
Then you're looking inside.
Then that is coming either... It's coming directly from how I'm feeling in that moment. Like now I could do an improvisation on, if I look inside myself, yes. What am I feeling based on where I am today? How are my emotions this morning? The space we're in, I react to.
And in the face-to-face experience, it is the other who is driving the experience.
Yeah.
It's not the other in you, but the other in the other.
I feel that is the other.
Well, Lacan was speaking of the unconscious as the discourse of the other.
Yeah.
It is something like that. To be present with the other in you, you need the help of the other of the other. Something like that. We will do. Yes, it's possible to write a mathematical representation of your.
Really?
Yes, I don't know, but the impression that it will be helpful to have a paper and to write something and to see, because it's R S from one, R S from the other. It is the unconscious of the other. The unconscious is in you, and it's a complex combination of these different dimensions.
I think there's a big part of it which is totally unexplainable. There's some kind of, I don't know if you felt it or not, but there's some kind of energy, or at least a dialogue that happens, which I don't know what it is, but I feel a kind of, when this works really well, a kind of telepathy or something, like there's this unknown message or ability to communicate, and that's what's so interesting to me, is how far can we explore other ways of communicating besides words, or besides constantly flashing images at people in mobile phones, or
it is really the unknown at work. And unknown, in German terms of Freud, unbewusst. It's something
it's unconscious.
Unconscious, yes, really, the unknown.
Well, as we're reaching soon the end of this conversation, you mentioned a couple of times your reference to some ethnic music, and maybe you can tell us a few things about your background and about yourself.
Sure.
So you mentioned ethnic, about my ancestors, so maybe tell us your trajectory.
This is my other interest as an artist, So the one is finding ways of interacting with public, and through music or through nonverbal communication, bringing them into some kind of experience that we never really have in daily life. And the other is, again, something about looking inside, and that's going towards rituals which come from ancient traditions. And I'm very interested in many cultures, but recently my main research and main practice in performance of this is in my background, which is Lithuanian and Ukrainian, which I haven't explored yet, but I'm very interested in. And this kind of, you know, in the ancient traditions, these rituals were a way of grounding and of finding a kind of trajectory in life, which gives a meaning and a structure. So, for example, one performance that I did when I had this residency in Barbican Centre in London in July, I invited these 4 women from Lithuania who sing this, I think it's the oldest kind of folk song in all of Europe. It's before Christianity, before anything, very otherworldly sounding, and it's all based on rituals which are for life cycle, harvest, birth, death, marriage, water, asking for rain, and I created this performance which unites the music with reviving these rituals. And again, that was long duration, 4-hour performance, and the goal was to reawaken that in myself and in the public, to cause them to think about their own origins and their own roots. Something which I was interested to discuss with you or ask you is this: when we're talking about unconscious, or the improvisation is coming from my musical unconscious, I did have this feeling, why I was so drawn to this ancestors' research. When I hear music of Lithuania, for example, or Ukraine, I have this incredible emotional response of, like, I can't even describe how strong this reaction is. Like, I can just feel my whole body is like on fire. And I don't know if that's because I know that I come from there and I'm searching for that, or I remember it somehow through dreams, or is it possible to have this through the DNA or something, to have this memory of
Yeah, I mean, there is personally, I don't think so. I think it's cultural, but
I think too. Because it's the culture is also a process of memory and language,
and we become, our brain changes, continuously because of the experiences that we live in, and so you probably because of your upbringing, this
but
very strong.
I should say I never heard this music in my upbringing as a child. It wasn't ever present because I grew up in the States, and it's the classic migration to America story that all the traditions get cut. And so I never really had any connection with I did all my own active research.
But somehow I presume you're searching your own heritage. So it's a strong drive, actually.
And perhaps it is a return of the repressed in the subject, and also return of the repressed in the culture.
Yeah.
Something that insists behind you and through you.
But that's what I'm talking about, yeah.
Okay.
Where is that coming from? That's what I'm interested in.
Yes. From the unknown.
Yeah.
I think it will be impossible to give an answer. It will be a new work, a new discussion. Perhaps now it is time to Pierre to play violin.
Exactly. I look forward to this experience.
Me too.